Here's a list of 5 bottles perfect for introducing anybody to the world of bourbon. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch, and thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So that is right, today we are talking about gateway bourbons. Bourbons that are perfect for beginners or for people who are even averse or opposed to bourbon, to try to sort of convert them and get them to see that bourbon has so many wonderful flavors to offer. So if you're like me, you have a good number of friends who look at bourbon as something you do shots of, not really something that you have a flavorful, good experience with. They see it's, oh, that tastes like gasoline, that tastes like rubbing alcohol, that's like fire going down my throat. And they just have no sense of why you're enjoying the whiskey and the bourbon, and you want them to understand all the rich, great, sweet flavors that can come from bourbon. So these 5 bottles sort of solve that problem. They're some of the best for getting people into bourbon, and for me, a lot of them played a pivotal role in helping me dive deeper and deeper into the world of whiskey. Before we dive into the list, do just want to ask that if you're liking the content coming out of the channel, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I've got the goal now to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2022, and we'll do a really fun giveaway once we get to that point. So if you haven't already, subscribe. All right, everybody, let's get into the list. The first bottle is one that you're probably going to expect to be on this list, because for a lot of people who come from the world of enjoying wine, this is the way to go. And that is Angel's Envy. So this is a Kentucky straight bourbon finished in port wine casks, which gives it this layer of sweetness, a wine sweetness, a grape sweetness. It's both on the nose and transfers over to the palate. So for anybody who's really into wine, this will probably be a great place to start. It'll also just be something that can kind of knock down the barriers for them and be like, look, I've got a bourbon, but it's not just a bourbon. It's finished in port wine casks, so if you like wine, you might like this. And that gets people to open up their minds and reconsider what bourbon could be. Another benefit to Angel's Envy is that it is 86.6 proof, so it's definitely not going to overwhelm people's palates that much, and it's going to be a more approachable whiskey overall. All right, let's talk about our second bottle, which when we talk about sweet, approachable bourbons, this is always at the top of the list. It's a great crowd pleaser, and it's one that helped me, in particular, learn to love the sweet richness of bourbon, and that is Woodford Reserve Double Oak. So another bottle that sits in that $50 range. This is 90.4 proof, and it's finished in a second oak barrel. I believe the second oak barrel is toasted, so that's going to draw out a lot of wood sugars. And this just tastes to me like s'mores in a glass. I mean, it's got chocolate, milk chocolate sweetness on it, vanilla, a little bit of graham cracker in there. So if you're looking to get somebody into bourbon and they are hesitant, basically you can pitch this bottle, Woodford Reserve, as sort of a candy bar in a glass, a s'mores in a glass, and you can give them a sense of that, help them draw out some of those flavors. And I really do think, since this one has such a sweetness to it and there's not much ethanol on it, they'll be able to pick up some of those flavors for sure. And hopefully that'll spark a new love for bourbon. Okay, so both bourbons we've talked about so far have rye content in them, which can often be associated with spice and spiciness. But the next one we have doesn't, and it can be a really nice experience for people starting out, and that is Larceny Small Batch. So as you can see, I finished this bottle myself. It was one of the first ones I got in my whiskey journey that I bought for myself, basically because people praised it as a softer wheated bourbon, but full of flavor. And for me, this one has a little bit of chocolatiness on it, but it's also got some nuttiness, and it's rich. It's a really decent small batch bourbon, and it's 92 proof, I believe. Yep, 92. And it's right in that like $25 range, so you can get this pretty cheaply. For me, knowing that bourbon could have that nuttiness and vanilla characteristic to it, it was just really approachable. And I think for a lot of people, a wheated bourbon is a really great place to start because it's got these softer tones to it overall. All right, for bottle number 4, we got to step back a little bit and compare to the Woodford Reserve Double Oak, because we're looking at another Double Oak product, and that is 1910 from Old Forester. Now, a lot of people aren't even aware that this is a double oak product, but it is, and it's actually finished in a secondary barrel that is very heavily charred, almost to the point of disintegrating, they say. And the Woodford Reserve is finished in a toasted barrel, so much lighter process there. This one, for me, the 1910, just has this rich, desserty sweetness, almost like Bananas Foster. I always get banana on Old Forester products. It's got this barrel spice, but also this real great oaky sweetness. And the Woodford, in comparison, is much more s'mores and chocolate. So just a different way to express how sweet bourbon can be. I especially think the nose on the 1910 is really sweet. If you have friends who aren't into bourbon and you tell them to smell the 1910, they're probably going to pick up a lot of sweetness, even if they can't describe it, and that's going to be inviting them into the process. Again, this one sits right around that $50 price point. It is 93 proof, so we are working our way up in proof a little bit, but still very approachable and sweet overall. And one that was absolutely pivotal for me in seeing how powerfully sweet bourbon can be. Okay, for our fifth and final bottle, this is one you might not expect to be on this list. It is stepping it up in proof a little bit, but for me, this is just quintessential bourbon, still approachable, but gonna introduce people to what bourbon at its core is really like, and that is Four Roses single barrel. So for me, added feature, added bonus is that this is a single barrel. You can tell people that there's just one barrel that went into here, and this flavor profile is sort of special for them, which is great, but also beautiful bottle. It's 100 proof, so we're talking about something that's not at all light in proof, but I still think it's super approachable. It's got great vanilla, it's got great caramel, a little bit of a spiciness, but not too much, because Four Roses is good at balancing a delicate sort of flavor profile with some heft. So it's just a well-rounded experience overall. Good mouthfeel too. They're gonna feel that. They're gonna feel like they're drinking something with some presence to it, which is really nice. And for me, I've had a lot of people in my life I've shared this with as a gift, people who aren't necessarily big bourbon fans, and they have absolutely loved it. They have seen a glimmer of how good bourbon can be through Four Roses single barrel, because I think it's just so good and sweet and rich and just great bourbon overall. All right, everybody, that is the full list here of 5 bottles that I consider gateway bottles, bottles that will help you introduce others to all that whiskey and bourbon can offer. And of course, the general theme here is something very sweet, something approachable, not super high in proof, softer, more delicate, or richer and sweeter are the ways to go when you're introducing people to bourbon. These were all instrumental in some way for me to see what bourbon could offer, and I've seen other people really respond to each of these bottles in different ways. So for me, these are a great set of 5 if you're looking for the next bottle you need to try to get your friends, family, coworkers, whoever it is, into the world of bourbon. I want to hear from you guys, though, on what you consider the best gateway bottles. What have you seen success with in bringing people into the world of whiskey? What bottles have you introduced them to? Put those all down in the comments below. Until I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey, keep sharing good whiskey, and cheers.